I'm Marc Silber. I'm a photographer, author, and educator here in Carmel, California. And I want to talk to you about something really important, and that is how to achieve your creative goal as a photographer without struggling with gear and software. And I think you'd agree that's a really important topic. Unless you love struggling with gear or being fixated on gear and messing around with it and learning new software all the time, I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in the art of photography. And if you've been around my channel, you know that's really the whole goal that I teach, is how to make a breakthrough and achieve your goals as a photographer. Well, the fastest ways to do that I know of is to up your game in terms of composition. And I have written a composition field guide, which you can get. And if you go up here, you'll see that you can get that downloaded for free. But I want to walk you through this because there's amazing tools in here that you should be putting right to use. So one of the things that you can do with this composition field guide is put it on your phone. And when you're out shooting and you want to get inspiration, open it up. It's right there. It'll give you ideas. Okay, so I'm just going to hit some of the high points. First of all, framing is a really key tool that you should be using all the time. I learned this from my Uncle Sambo when I was about 12 years old. He taught me, Marco, if you put a frame or an edge around it, like that tree, it's going to make a much more interesting photograph. So framing serves these purposes. One is it gives you some depth here. You can see this is the foreground, and it puts an edge around it, and it leads your eye to the background. And in this case, we have the mountain, the roads, and that sort of thing. And it gives an edge of depth and layering to an otherwise two-dimensional image. It also just kind of dresses it up. It says, hey, look where I want you to look and pay attention to this. So it's very important to always look at your framing. Now, I wrote a book about this. There's multiple ways to use framing. You can use doors, you can use windows, you can use objects, trees. Look for framing. That's going to up your game right away. Okay, the next one is you've got two formats here. You've got landscape format, which is pretty obvious. When we shoot a landscape, we're shooting it this way. But you know what? You can shoot an environmental portrait of a person, even though it's a portrait, you're shooting it in landscape. So for instance, they're out working in their office or their studio or whatever. You could show the entire studio. And there's the person in it, in that landscape, which serves another purpose. You can do the same thing with portrait. This is a portrait of a deer. So even though this is a, quote, landscape photograph, it's much more interesting as a portrait. It shows the height of the deer. It kind of accentuates with the trees that there's depth and height here. This is another use of your portraiture. The other thing I want you to always think about is turning your image on an angle. So I have a little video here that actually shows how I captured this. This was 7th grade, age 12. I had this idea of turning my camera on an angle about 18 degrees, it turned out. It was not an iPhone. I'm just using this as an illustrative point. But remember, you can turn your camera at any angle. You can look down, which is going to do a certain thing. It's going to make the object appear smaller. You can look up, which is going to make it appear bigger. You can view it from the side. There's all sorts of different angles. Use them. They're all there. One cool thing is if you've got a ladder, you can always climb up a ladder and take a look down, which gives you a whole overview. In the movie industry, they call that the God shot, because it's kind of like you're way up there looking down. Try that. I want you to actually get out there and use these things, and that's why I want you to actually have the field guide with you. Okay, we're all familiar with rule of thirds, although it's not a rule. We call it a point of thirds. This photograph is from David Smith, who is an outdoor photographer. And I interviewed him. He was talking about using the points of third. So in the case of the zebra, you can see it's kind of lined up right on his face there. But what he said was really important is leave space in front of your subject. If they're looking in that direction, leave space there so they don't feel sort of closed off and claustrophobic. If they're looking down, leave space below them. If they're looking up, leave space above them. That's going to give you depth and also help you to tell that story even better. Use your points of third. Yes, it does work. It doesn't work all the time. There's many exceptions to this rule. Sometimes, that's not a rule again, but sometimes your subject dead in the center or way off to the side will work better than following the points of thirds all the time. Use it as a tool. Don't overuse it. Geometry is from my good friend Henry Cartier-Bresson. He said geometry can be a pleasure. This is an example of a photograph in Big Sur using lots of geometry. Geometry will always add interest to your photograph. And you can see these geometric shapes. You can see the arc. You can see the pyramids, the lines. There's geometry all over this photograph. When you look for geometry, your eye will just naturally go to that. So a spiraling staircase, that's geometry. A building that's going upright, using that as a framing device, that's another combination of these two tools. And by the way, these composition tools do go together. Just like in cooking, in a recipe, you don't just have flour and sugar and salt. You can mix it in a variety of different ways, and you can add things to it to make biscuits, or you can make pancakes, or you can make bread. Using the same set of tools, you have a variety there. So keep that in mind, that you can combine these tools and should. Another one is using leading lines. I love leading lines, and there's a lot of examples in my photographs and very many and many other photographs and paintings. What does a leading line do? It leads your eye to the subject. You have your subject and your leading lines, in this case, the road, just leading right to that subject. This tells a story. This was an occasion when I was a teenager. This girl I knew was walking to her horses. She's carrying a saddle, and you can see the reins there. And I said, keep walking. I'm going to stay here. Don't be afraid to use the people you're with as your subjects, by the way. I do that all the time. Keep walking. She finally turned around and was kind of like, WTF, Mark, what are you doing here? And I captured her there. So you have the leading lines leading right to her. We also have the framing of the trees. So again, that's another combination tool of framing and trees and leading lines from the road. Okay, I want you guys to try these techniques. I'd like to hear in your comments how these work for you. And at the end of the day, do they help you achieve your creative goals as a photographer and get you out of any struggle with gear and software? Because it's not about that struggling, it's about achieving your goals. That's what I'm here for. So thank you guys for joining me. If you don't mind, would you subscribe? Enable the bell. If you like the video, give it a like. If you really like it, share it with your friends. And please, as always, leave your comments, because I love to hear from you guys. Okay, I'll see you again soon. We'll carry on with composition tools and other tools to help you achieve your creative goals. Until then, remember to get out and capture your own images of life.